We'll talk about transformations next, and so I'm providing you with a copy of this kind of all-in-one transformation reference sheet. You have seen this many times before as we've talked about transformations to all of our other functions: linear, absolute value, quadratic, cubic, and now we'll be talking about square root and cubed root. So the only thing that's different here is that I have changed what used to be parentheses to be a radical instead. And remember that the index is 2 if there isn't a number written here, but if it's something besides 2, we'll write a number. This table that's included in your notes breaks down each of our transformations individually instead of being all in one like the previous chart that I showed to you. So let's just briefly go over transformations and remind ourselves how they work. So if we have a horizontal translation, we are shifting left or right. And remember that that happens inside with x. So inside in this case means under the radical. And remember that it goes opposite of what you would think it would be. So when you see a negative sign, that's moving to the right, and a positive sign moves us to the left. Remember that that's because of the negative built into the equation. Vertical translations happen outside of our radical this time. Before it was outside of parentheses, but now that we're talking about radicals, we're talking about outside of the radical. So it's something tacked on the end, a positive or a negative, and positive goes up, negative goes down. And remember that these are outside. Reflections work the same as they have before. If you see a negative sign inside the radical, then that's a reflection in the y-axis. And that happens inside with x. If you see a negative sign outside, that is an x-axis reflection. So we are affecting the y values. Anything that was positive y becomes negative y, and vice versa. And that happens outside. So remember that a negative sign is separate than a number that might be behind the negative sign. Speaking of numbers, if we have a horizontal stretch or a shrink, we will be inside with x again. And remember that these are opposites, so inside with x and opposite. And in this case, opposite means reciprocal because we're multiplying by a number, so we will be dividing by a number. If we see a 3 in the equation, that is a horizontal shrink by a factor of 1/3. If we see a fraction, a proper fraction, in the equation, then that is a stretch by a factor of, in this case, 2. Vertical stretches and shrinks happen in the front, and it'll be a number that is either bigger than 1 or less than 1. If it's bigger than 1, such as this 4, then it's a stretch by a factor of 4. And if you see a number smaller than 1, then it's a shrink. So remember again that these happen outside because they're affecting vertical values.